So, I've been having this conversation a lot with friends and viewers of the channel about the future of Pokemon now that Pokemon Champions has been announced, which, if you don't know, is basically a competitive Pokemon battle simulator coming to Switch and mobile later this year, most likely around the time of Legend ZA, so they can really scratch the itch of the fans who are more in favor of the classic style of Pokemon battles compared to ZA's more real-time style or whatever this is. It looks pretty cool. But now some of you may be asking, why is Champions such a big deal for the future of Pokemon? And that, my friends, is a bit of a layered question, as it's not just Pokemon Champions, it's actually kind of the franchise as a whole. We got major shifts in how Pokemon's handling its anime, with Pokemon Horizon's next story arc not only aging up its cast, which hey, thank God, none of that 10 forever stuff, but also going beyond the region of Paldea, which it admittedly didn't have a lot to do with already, as the series was more kind of journey style, globetrotting. But by the end, Horizons had its own characters and story locations to really work with. Unlike the previous series, which basically just kind of used the in-game story and regions as basically their primary resource, outside of like some filler episodes, movies, or stuff like the Orange Islands. And then we have Pokemon Pocket, a mobile version of the Pokemon TCG that's making gangbusters worth of money by printing and battling with cards based around older Pokemon in a new style of card battle. This then leads back to Pokemon Champions, which seems to be going beyond what was established in the main game's battle system by selectively adding and updating elements to fit its own unique competitive experience, even tailoring Megas to work alongside Gen 9's main feature of terrestrialization. Now, any of these on their own wouldn't be enough for me to really think we're in for a big shift, but with all of them together, it really makes me think Pokemon might be finally moving away from their usual marketing strategies as a company. You see, before, everything and their mother was kind of just tied around the latest games at the time. When Black and White came out, all the cards, the anime, and the whatever basically had to be black and white in theme and feature all the new Pokemon characters and plot locations surrounding those games. And that of course included the competitive scene that just got 100 new monsters, abilities, and moves to work with. Now, when you're on a yearly schedule like Game Freak is with their games, you're already stressed out. But that's also on top of the fact that you need a bunch of new monsters and a new region to center everything around, while also making sure you don't add anything that breaks the competitive balance of the game, as we can't just have Landorus the Rainform being the top teams 5 gens in a row. Now, I've never thought about it this much before, as I never was much of a competitive battler, but I'm sure just balancing everything around that, on top of new gimmicks, moves, types, monsters, and abilities for over 1,000 plus Pokemon is probably a lot of work. And all that time could have been spent on polishing up the games, or maybe reworking the gameplay into something a tad fresher. I mean, come on, people always complain about how stale these things get. In fact, I bet that is why they decided to make huge cuts to the decks with the Switch console titles. It would just be too much work to balance every Pokemon in the game, while also getting used to not working with the smaller, weaker handhelds. And all of that work basically goes unnoticed with how much of your audience doesn't even care about the competitive scene anyway. But then again, plenty still do, so you have to make this concession. It's not like they can just make a game that's only competitive battles, right? Oh. Yeah, in hindsight, they must have been fiending looking at Pokemon Showdown for all these years. I mean, a game where you can just make a team and start swinging is something they really should have made all the way back with the original Stadium. But you gotta also remember that as much as we love Nintendo, they do be moving like fossils. They don't change or modernize till they absolutely have to. And after the recent games have clearly shown the downsides of this development style, yeah, it was time to bite the bullet. I'm of the opinion that Pokemon Champions will probably replace the competitive side of Pokemon for the foreseeable future, allowing players to still raise and send over teams of their favorite Pokemon from the main games, while also taking the load off of Game Freak's shoulders to be more creative and out there with their main titles. And if Game Freak isn't going to get more time to make these things, then at least take some of that load is a pretty good compromise. Not a great compromise, but it's pretty good. And with the anime and cards going their own directions as of late, I can see the other arms of the franchise not really needing to rely on the typical release model to stay successful. I mean, for God's sakes, we all know the merch will just shit out another Gengar or Eevee t-shirt and make $1 million. It's just that easy for them. And without the burden of a single generation for the franchise to back in its entirety, this allows Game Freak to really go back to some of the lesser developed parts of the franchise and flesh them out a bit. With new stories, characters, forms, gimmicks, abilities, evolutions, basically what we saw with Legends ZA and Arceus. I mean, we've already got over 1,000 plus Mons already. How about instead of adding another few hundred more, we just go back and rework some of them that never got the chance to shine? And Lord knows that's most of these dexes. Everybody had the same Sinnoh team. I didn't, but I'm weird. I like Steelix. I know he's kind of ass. I like him anyway. But seriously, now you have a whole title that you can just shift around and change with like an update or two. And with that, you don't even need to stick with the main battle styles for your main stuff anymore. You could just make up something new like ZA is doing with the real-time stuff. It would be so fun to go back and see other regions in a new light. Hell, even if it's Kanto. I wouldn't mind going back as long as it was like an experience we could have never had before. I love Let's Go, but the fact that you can argue it's inferior to or on par with 20 to 30-year-old titles is kind of pathetic. And with this new approach, we could see things like a game set entirely around Lumiose, or maybe a game that actually focused on a Pokemon war, perhaps? Black and White Zero? I mean, the original dragons split up because of a war. I don't know, it'd be kinda cool to see. Of course, this is not me saying there won't be new regions or Pokemon or whatever. I'm just saying this franchise finally feels like it has the freedom to do what it should have done years ago and really expand on what a Pokemon can be. Or maybe I'm just getting my hopes up and we just get Gen 10 and Black and White remakes that look like a shitty version of My Sims. You never know, I guess. You know what? Fine. Fuck it. Make Black and White look like this. I don't care. Just give me Ranger 4. You know, like for real. I will never complain about Pokemon as a franchise again if you just make a new Ranger game every once in a while. And they have to be good. You know, they have to be good games. That's the part of the deal. But hey, maybe that's too much for y'all. There's my olive branch. Take it or leave it. I'm out. See you later, boys. Love ya. Bye.